What's it like to grow up with spiritual eyes in a hopeless place? This is Yasida, the spiritual samurai. You know, if you have ever taken the time to look back at a lot of your early years and some of the strange things that you may have seen that is considered supernatural, maybe you lived, of course, in economically depressed places, crime infested environments, places that carry a lot of dark energy. You know, I can say this for myself, when I realized when I was a child that I had this sensitivity to the spiritual realm that most people don't have. People only see the surface layer of things. But when it came to me, or maybe when it came to yourself, if you're watching this video, most likely you resonate. You notice that no one else can really feel or sense certain energies to the magnitude that you do. And so that's when you realize that you're very different from the rest of the crowd. And it could be very upsetting. It could be very stressful. And this brings me to another point that people who possess high levels of empathy have a higher risk of developing PTSD by the simple fact that we can sense so much, we can detect so much energy, be it positive or negative, and we start to internalize it if we're not careful. And in this video, I kind of want to explain all these different aspects and how they work together, both combining the spiritual and the psychological. And also, it's another way for us to understand how these things work so that we can protect our energy a lot better. So we're going to get into it. So what I remember is, so when you are a person that's very sensitive to the spiritual realm and you live in a hopeless place, a place that is full of darkness, a lot of crime and poverty and abuse, all these crazy things happening. You notice that it's almost like you could sense the presence of restless souls around you. And I recall certain instances where I would look at an empty lot, or I would look at certain places, like maybe you noticed that you felt drawn, not necessarily like you wanted to notice these things, but you would look at a certain landmark, a certain area, a certain corner, and you just felt like something happened or something's about to happen. You either have the premonition, which is foreseeing something, or you have I don't know what the term is, but it's when you can see what happened in the past or in the near past without having prior knowledge of it. And, it could be anything. And of course you might think, well, this is, obviously if you live in an area like that, in a rough area, obviously you're going to feel a lot of negative energy, but you gotta understand, not everybody can actually feel these things, unless some people might say, well, somebody was, unalived in this corner or whatever. And we understand that part, but it's when you when you sense on a spiritual level, a high level of distress in this neighborhood, in this community. There's a lot of suffering in the spiritual realm, and you could see the darkness just coming from the woods or coming from the empty lot or the corner, coming from or the alleyway. These are places where a lot of, bad things have happened. And there's a lot of that. And then maybe you try to go to sleep and you had a hard time, so growing up, you might have had a hard time falling asleep because you had nightmares and you didn't necessarily witness somebody being unalive necessarily, although some people have, because of, unfortunately, because of where your environment. But if you lived in that place, but you've heard gunshots, or you've heard the sounds of what you would normally hear in a place like that. Maybe you seen bullet holes in your building, in your window, or in somebody else's window, your next door, and things like that. You could sense something very demonic that comes from these type of areas. That there's something eerie about it that goes beyond just, oh, this is just the way things are, you living in a environment like this. You see, like, it's more than just crime. It's almost like a lot of these young men, some are young women too, but mostly young men are it's almost like these dark entities are just pushing these men into self-destruct mode. And it's very sad, because maybe you grew up and you saw them when they were kids, and then they grow up and they lose their lives very, very early. Maybe you went to school with them, and they're not alive anymore. They could have graduated the same year as you, possibly, and they couldn't make it with you. So it's a lot of heartbreaking things that you've been through, and you kind of learn to be emotionally numb, and you kind of have to, because when you see so many things like that, and on top of your own traumas, your own things going on, combined with those around you, there's so much intense energy that can really become overwhelming. So somehow you kind of have to learn to, it is not like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's on a supernatural level. It's not like it's not like you're gonna cry every day. That's not what I'm saying. By distress or by energy, it's almost like you can see and sense the darkness in some of these people, and how this person was just operating normal. This person had a soul. You see them growing up. They were, when they were children, they had a soul. But then once they start hitting those teen years, you start to see this darkness take over them. And then the more they engage in doing, working for the devil, in whatever form that comes in, they start to slowly lose their soul. They lose bits and pieces of yourself. And that is the meaning of sinning against the flesh. And sinning is basically brings you closer to death, which is why God warns us about these things. Sinning only brings you closer to death, and it chips away at your soul. It chips away of who you are and your true essence. And then when you become to the point that the more you engage in this, and the more, you don't listen to the voice of God, you don't listen to the people that was sent to you to help you to see the light. If you reject, every time these individuals constantly reject the light to the point that they start to go against the light, to the point that they start to want to unalive people who carry the light. At that point, if this happens too often, of course, God is going to protect his children, but, and sometimes that could come in various forms. When I say God protects his children, that means that, because that could mean you stay alive and fulfill your purpose, and, your God removes you from that environment in some way. Or it could also mean that, I don't know, something happens that diverts you away from that. This is another topic, but I personally believe that sometimes when a person leaves the earth prematurely, it's another way to, it's like a fast ticket to eternal life, because sometimes I don't know how God works, exactly how this thing works, because I'm thinking about the people that maybe you thought you're thinking about the people that that were good people, and they were unalived, at a young age, and it's very sad. And of course you're thinking, why would God allow that? And the best answer I can come up with is, that's just a faster way for God to get them out of there. And I don't want to say it like that, because I know that could be misunderstood, but So far, that's what I've gathered, or it could be they could be done by natural causes. Sometimes somebody could have an illness and they leave, unfortunately, and that could be another way to escape this hectic world and whatever they're around, because I don't know, but that's just the only thing. But that's beside the point. I digress. God gives everyone opportunities to get right. And so the more that this individual that's in the darkness continues to go against the light, go against people that really want to help them, that want to help them see the light, to the point that they want to actually destroy the people that's trying to help them. When they start biting the hand that feeds them time and time again, this person's going to end up reprobate. And when they become reprobate, it pretty much, they lost their soul. They're soulless. They made a choice to serve the darkness, and now they are a worker of iniquity, and you just can't trust them no more. So this is why sometimes people, you might see people that you thought that you knew in childhood. Everyone's innocent, at least this, for the most part, we're innocent when we're children. And then the older you get, you choose a path, and based on your free will, right, that determines where you're going to end up. Your free will, your decisions. Everyone has decisions to make. Everybody has the opportunity to stand up when they fall down. But some people, they stay down, and to the point that they end up in the underground, because now they don't want to get up and they don't want to stand up to the ways of the Most High, and that's how you end up. People end up being divided now because this person took a whole nother path that you never even thought. And this, one of the most heartbreaking things about this journey, is that you grow up with people that you love, man, that you care about. They had plans for the future, and then either their life is taken away early, or they end up falling into addictions, or they end up doing the works of the darkness. They end up, basically, another way to say that is a person that's basically in the streets or anything like that. They might end up, it could be so many other different ways. They might end up raising another generation that is a broken home, It's a lot of things that could happen, and very painful, very sad to see that kind of thing. And when you're a person that senses a lot of energy, it's like, you learn early on that you should keep stuff to yourself, but at the same time you want to tell them, hey, what you see, your insight, you want to tell them your knowledge. But what I came to realize, which is a very sad reality, is that most people don't want to hear the truth. Most people don't want to hear wisdom. They reject it. I can't tell you how many times that I've tried to, I guess, indirectly inspire the people around me and try to inform them or let them know something. Sometimes I feel led to say certain things, I feel led to say something to certain people that I've encountered that maybe could help them, or maybe give them a hint of their potential. But unfortunately, sometimes we tend to project onto other people what we would do. We see their potential, but they don't see it in themselves, and we don't know where their mind is, What I can say is, going back to when I was a child and how I could sense energy all around me, I knew it was something eerie about certain places, I could be in a different town and it'd be different. The atmosphere is a lot lighter. And then I could be in a place that, once you head to, you head home or whatever, or not your household necessarily, in some cases, yeah, but just the area, the street. And even though I was very young, there's certain streets that I knew, certain landmarks that I knew that it had this sense that the presence of unaliving was going on. And this is before I was even aware about this specific street that I was living in. And I was just like, it's crazy how you don't necessarily have to see it, but when you hear it and you sense it, it's enough to paint a picture of the suffering in your community. It's very sad. And sometimes I remember, I'll never forget, the words of wisdom that I've heard, um, growing up from somebody that, you know, somebody that means a lot to me. And this wisdom, well, that seems like it's not with them anymore at the moment, but I was often warned about having too much empathy for those that get deleted out there in the streets, right? And it's only natural for a person who has the light of God inside them to care about what's going on around them. Yeah, I don't have to be your best friend. You don't have to be the same ethnicity as me for me to care about human life, At the end of the day, when those individuals fall by their own sword or by their own gun, which is in this case, it's very sad to see that they never believed in their own potential. They never believed in themselves, or maybe they were not loved in the correct way that could have allowed them to be strengthened. And that was what shows me the power of a mother's love and a father's presence, And unfortunately, some people don't have any of those structures. And even if they have one, sometimes a mother's love can be at least enough. It's better than nothing, right? But some people have nothing, and it's very sad, And you can't help but when you carry the light of God, you can't help but to mourn the death of, forgotten and lost souls. And when I say lost souls, it's not saying it in a way where it's like, oh, like it's not coming from an arrogant position at all. It's coming from a position of, this person really lost their way through, a lot of the deceptions. It's kind of like the sheep that was led astray, I think that's a biblical parable, but it's so sad to see, and that some of these people they didn't reach full maturity to be able to learn from their mistakes, to be able to learn from, how they were just misled, and from what I also recall is I remember, like, man, I was really young, like I was a kid, and I could just sense, like, I recall seeing a neighbor's eyes. I was around maybe 7 or 8, and I could just look at him. I could just see the sadness in his eyes, and I was always very good at reading the sadness in a person's eyes, and at such a young age to be able to detect that, I could just tell, and it's so weird. It's almost like I could feel the same way he felt. It's like when I get close to somebody's presence, I could feel how they feel, and I could understand why and where the depression and anxiety comes from. And sometimes it would manifest into me having sleeping issues. And maybe you experience the same thing. And that's what happens when you have a lot of empathy. And when you're a child and you're spiritually connected, you can feel these things. And on a broad scale, it's like you could feel this whole community is crying. Not like the people are crying, but like the land in which we stand upon is suffering. The land that we stand upon is crying overdue tears of justice. Justice needs to be served, but unfortunately, that's not really happening around here. Or at least not yet. See, we're in the physical realm. So we are a slave to time, but in the spiritual realm, there is no time. So whatever God says will happen, will definitely happen. It's just that when we're so caught up in this physical existence that we're in, being in this human vessel, it can be very hard for us to see that God's justice will be served, that God will bring justice, basically. It's hard to see that sometimes because we get so emotionally invested into the events in our lives, and honestly, who couldn't, right? The tragic events that happen in your life, everything that you felt, from the negative feelings, the anger, the wrath, the sorrow, the depression, the loneliness, just feeling so down, these are part of the human experience. You are a human being. You're going to feel these negative emotions. It's a matter of finding the wisdom to be able to cope with the tragic events that we've experienced, that we face, and the people around us that are suffering. See, I'm the type of person that even if something doesn't directly affect me, or I stay to myself, and that's my way of protecting my energy, because I have to, because I know how much I could care about someone that I'm close to. And a lot of people, like I said, it's very hard for a lot of people to move on with life when they lose people. And I think that, especially if you're a person who's spiritually connected, right? It is very important for you to understand what the spiritual realm is and what it's like. And it's important to understand that time does not exist in the spiritual realm. And you may think that justice is not being served right now. Divine justice will always be served, even if you don't see it at this moment. We're a slave to time in the physical realm. So we don't see it now, but it will happen. It will happen, And another thing too is we have the tendency to get very attached to this realm, to where we think that any and everything that happens here is the end all be all. But when you understand the fact that this is not the only place in which we transcend, you're not gonna worry so much about all the, some of the things that happen. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's a good way to explain it, but it's not that you don't care. It's just that you're understanding, hey, that where souls go, and this is why faith in God is powerful, and it's important to have, because it gives you a sense of comfort. But in a lot of people, even some atheists may say, oh yeah, believing in God, it's just to make you feel good about dying, and that's a very callous way to put it. But I will say that it's not only, yeah, it brings you comfort, right? But you got to understand that this is real. The spiritual realm, the Most High, it's real. God is real, whether or not a person decides to believe. But when you believe, you have the tendency to invest a lot of time into understanding the ways of God and understanding spiritual knowledge. And the more spiritual knowledge you understand, you start to feel more at ease. And I know that's kind of contradictory to what King Solomon said about knowledge increases my sorrow. He's talking about worldly knowledge. Worldly knowledge does not answer all of the questions that we have. The reason why I stopped being an atheist is because I realized that sometimes knowledge was, I found questions that even knowledge could not answer. Worldly knowledge, to be exact. And that is where wisdom, divine wisdom, spiritual insight, that's where all of that comes into play. And that comes with searching for God and his ways and understanding, even though as a human being we can only understand so much about the ways of the Most High, but we understand enough to be able to bring healing and tranquility, serenity, and peace to those around us that don't understand what's happening. And a lot of people end up losing faith in God because they think, why would you do this to me? Why would God allow such tragedies to go on for so long? You got to understand energy and the land that you stand upon. You see, if you live in a major city, and I was use Chicago, for example, right? Chicago, because that's like around the area that I live in, Chicago, its neighboring communities, including different parts around it, like Gary, Indiana, stuff like that. The impoverished parts. You're going to notice there's a certain type of energy in these certain places. And this is common in every major city. It's not just Chicago. I'm just using that as an example. But there's a certain type of energy that exists. And this is why even in the Bible, God commands his prophets and the people who hear him to say, to leave from certain places. It's not about, oh, you're afraid. No, this ain't no fear tactic. This is wisdom. When you know that a place is oversaturated with darkness and evil acts and all this stuff, man. When darkness is spreading like wildfire, you gotta leave, because it manifests into you losing a lot of things and losing your blessings. Your blessings are blocked when you're living in places that are oversaturated in demonic energy. There's a lot of demonic energy in certain places. I know you know that. You know, there's a reason why these type of places exist. They are known as the hopeless places. You know, nobody's investing in there, and there's a lot of pain. And you're just like, what is it? And sometimes you might think, well, maybe it's not the town, it's the people living in it. I would say that I think that it's a combination of so many factors, but it all lies in the spiritual realm, understanding that there's a lot of dark entities that have taken over so many people that have ended up letting go of their soul. And when they let go of their soul, using their free will to do wrong constantly, and they have no care in the world. Some people really don't care. Now, some people feel remorse and they come to the light, right? Which is great. But then you have those people that just never wake up from it, and they just become reprobate. And now you have a area that is concentrated with reprobate-minded people that just want to destroy the light. You know what I mean? And when you're a person that is a person of light and you live in a hopeless place, those who are soulless are going to know that you're not one of them. And then they're going to want to destroy you, which is why it is wise that once you start having a more higher frequency, higher vibration, and you start to ascend and grow with God, it is essential that you change your environment to where you can thrive. It's kind of like, I like to paint this picture of if you ever did gardening, if you ever gardened before, sometimes you start off with creating a seedling. You have like a seed, and then it creates this little sprout, and then you put it in a little pot. You put it in a little pot, but then as the stem starts to grow, the roots start to grow as well. Everything's growing, and then to the point where there's not enough room for those roots to go any deeper. So now you're gonna have to transport that plant into either a bigger pot, or you might have to put that plant into your backyard so the roots can go even deeper into the earth and absorb more nutrients. You cannot absorb nutrients in a hopeless place. You cannot grow in an economically depressed environment where majority of the population has pretty much lost their soul. They've given their soul, they're soulless, and now they want to take away your light. You notice that? That's why you don't go back to environments that you grew up in when you have become successful in whether you have a growth mind. If you have a growth mindset, whether it's that or you increase in finances in any way, any increase, any abundance that you receive, you cannot be in a place where there is nothing, because that is how you're going to stand out, and it's just not going to be good. And when you see the energy that operates in these environments, you will understand that. Some people have this thing where they're like, it's not about forgetting where you come from. It's just that you have evolved and you have to put yourself in higher ground where you can actually grow and thrive. You came from a place that focused mainly on survival. Do you want to live in survival mode for the rest of your life? Because that's what it's going to be. Especially if you're a person of light, your light is going to constantly get drained, and to the point that it's going to become dimmed out. The more that you're around this dark energy, you know what I mean? Because it's an energy. It's an energy that has operated and has possessed a lot of people to go against the light. That's just all it is. That's really it. And this takes place all over the world. It's a spiritual war that we're in. And it's just crazy, man, the things that we've seen. And when I was younger, when I used to have trouble sleeping because I kept hearing stuff. I kept hearing, I don't know, it's so weird. It's almost like I'm able to absorb the sounds and the stimuli around, and then it would go into my subconscious, and then I would paint a very sad and a picture that I could sense. Like, you could just sense the presence of death being near you when you could just tell there's so many people suffering in the building that you live in, or the street, or wherever you're at. You don't have to actually witness it. You could just sense it. You could tell, you know? And then you look at, sometimes you could look at bullet holes in windows and you'll be like, yeah, it's just on a spiritual level. You just know that, this is not only is this a war, like with bullets, but it's a spiritual war more than anything. That's what it is. And the more we could see this, the more it's easy to let go of the things that do not align with us, and continue to pray and help uplift people that are trying to get out of that dynamic, of that situation, place, right? People that want to get out of the hopeless place. You have to come together and support each other in any way. You know what I mean? And that's all it is. This is all a battle of between the light and the dark spirits that take over. Because the hopeless place has both energy, both type of energies, evil and good. And whatever you feed the most will become what you essentially will become, right? What you're going to be. If you feed the evil, the more you do works for the devil, of course, this person eventually is going to lose their soul. You pretty much gave your soul away. A person that constantly fights to keep the light alive inside of them, then they're going to basically ascend spiritual ranks. And it's hard to see at first, especially when you're young, because it just feels like you're just suffering. You're suffering. You're suffering because of what you're going through, what you're witnessing, what other people around you are going through. You don't understand why so many people are in such pain. People that were good people. Some of them were good people and they're going through it. It can be very confusing, when we don't understand why is God allowing this. And this is a major question that we always ask ourselves. And that's basically this. It's just more than anything to me. It's just this physical realm to me is like a spiritual simulation where it's like it tests your free will. And I know you probably heard that a lot, and that's pretty much what it is, and the more that you feed your spirit, and then you start to have that spiritual eye, you're going to be able to foresee a lot of different things, and it's going to help you. The more you grow with God, the more you put your faith in God, you pray for wisdom and discernment, He's going to show you things. But the thing is, it's a matter of, are we going to take heed to the warnings that God shows us? Are we going to take heed to the wisdom of God? Are we going to take heed to this wisdom? Because some of us are hard-headed. God could show us something and we just act like we didn't see it. And you're going to see that. You're going to suffer when you don't listen to wise counsel, whether it comes from signs you see in the waking world when you're in real life, or maybe you have dreams about certain things. Now, certain dreams, I understand not all dreams are, necessarily a divine message. Not all of them are, but when you have a dream when you have a powerful dream, you know it. You did. You know it, and it's something about it. Especially if you prayed about it. If you have a prayer life, a strong prayer life, you're gonna know, I know what this is and I know what I need to do. But that comes with spiritual growth. That comes with getting closer to God on a personal level, And that's pretty much it. And this is why that's the message that I have for today. Thank you for listening, and God bless.